My wife had a reminder on her phone to call another man before I got home. I saw it because the screen lit up on our kitchen counter while I was putting away groceries. Call Daniel before Robert gets home. That was the whole reminder. My name is Robert Callahan. I was 65, retired from supervising maintenance crews for a county school district in Des Moines, Iowa. My wife, Ellen, was 62 and still worked 3 days a week at a medical billing office. We had been married 36 years. I did not touch her phone. I did not need to. The words were bright enough from where I stood. There could have been 20 innocent explanations. A contractor, a former coworker, someone arranging a surprise. I was still standing there when Ellen came in from the laundry room. She saw me, then the phone. Her eyes stopped on the screen. You're home early. Store wasn't busy. She picked up the phone and cleared the reminder with her thumb. Everything okay? I asked. Fine. She slipped the phone into her pocket. A few minutes later, she carried a laundry basket upstairs, even though everything in it was already folded. Then I heard the bedroom door close. Her voice came through the ceiling. Low. Too low to make out words. When she came downstairs 20 minutes later, I asked, Who were you talking to? Work thing. On your day off? They still know my number. She opened the dishwasher and began putting away clean glasses. No panic. No explanation. Just one glass after another. I stood there wondering whether I was inventing a problem. Then Ellen's phone buzzed in her pocket. She looked at the screen, turned it face down on the counter, and said, I need to start dinner. For the next week, I told myself not to become an idiot. Ellen had never given me a reason to distrust her. We raised 2 daughters, survived my mother living with us for 3 hard years, and made it through one stretch when I worked so much overtime that our marriage felt mostly like passing each other in doorways. We were ordinary. That was why the reminder bothered me. Nothing in our ordinary life explained why my name needed to appear in instructions for a private call. On Saturday morning, I asked whether she wanted to meet friends for lunch. Can't. I have something around noon. What? Just an errand. I waited. She did not say Daniel. That afternoon, she returned with 2 white paper coffee cups in the holder of her car. One was empty. The other was half full. I noticed because she carried both inside. You drink 2 coffees now. She looked down. Oh, this one isn't mine. Whose? Someone I was with. Again, an opening. Again, no Daniel. The cups were from Prairie Cup, a local chain Ellen usually complained tasted burnt. Over the next 2 weeks, I noticed the same cups twice more. Then there were lemon cookies. Cheap ones from the grocery store. She had been buying them for months, maybe longer. I had never cared. One evening, she slipped a package into her tote bag. You like those now? They're not for me. For who? A friend. The words sounded chosen. I said, Daniel? Her hand stopped. Only for a second. Then she pulled the zipper closed. Who's Daniel? I almost laughed. Instead, I said, never mind. She looked at me carefully. Neither of us believed that conversation was over. 3 days later, I saw another Prairie Cup coffee in her car. Beside it sat an unopened package of lemon cookies. Ellen had told me she was spending the afternoon alone. That was the first time I stopped trying to convince myself there was probably nothing to explain. I saw Daniel on a Wednesday because my dentist canceled. My appointment was 3 blocks from a neighborhood senior center, where Ellen sometimes dropped off paperwork for a former co-worker. I was turning into a grocery store lot when I saw her car near a small diner across the street. I could have kept driving. Instead, I parked. Through the window, Ellen sat across from a man, mid-50s, heavy-set, dark beard gone mostly gray. He wore a faded Iowa State sweatshirt and kept rubbing his thumb around the rim of his coffee cup. I knew before anyone introduced him. Daniel. They talked for nearly 40 minutes. Nothing dramatic. Then Daniel reached across the table and put both hands around Ellen's. She let him. He lowered his head. Ellen leaned forward. Their foreheads nearly touched. Then Daniel began crying. His shoulders moved hard enough that Ellen stood, walked around the table, and held him against her. I left before they separated. At home, I walked around the kitchen pretending I was looking for something. Ellen arrived an hour later carrying a Prairie Cup coffee and a half-empty package of lemon cookies. "How was your day?" she asked. "Dentist canceled." Her eyes came up. "Oh." I went over by Franklin Avenue. Silence. "I saw you." She set the coffee down. "With Daniel." Her mouth tightened. "Yes." "Who is he?" Ellen pulled out a chair, but did not sit. "Someone I should have told you about." That sentence hurt more than a denial would have. "How long?" She looked toward the window. "About 4 years." "For years." The coffee. The cookies. Calls scheduled around me. Daniel had not appeared suddenly. I had simply started noticing what had been there. Ellen told me that evening. At least the first part. Daniel Reese was not her lover. He had never been her lover. He was the son of Margaret Reese. I remembered Margaret. She had worked as an office aide at Lincoln Middle School when I supervised maintenance for the district. Small woman, fast walker, peppermint candies in her sweater pocket. Daniel had been in his 20s then. Ellen knew Margaret through a church food pantry. For years earlier, Margaret moved to New Mexico to live near her sister. Before leaving Des Moines, she asked Ellen to check in on Daniel once in a while. He had recently stopped drinking and was trying to rebuild a routine. At first, Ellen called him every couple weeks. Then he started volunteering at the pantry. Sometimes they had coffee afterward. The diner meetings came later. The lemon cookies were Margaret's favorite. Daniel ate them when he got anxious. The scene I had watched through the diner window had nothing romantic in it. Daniel was preparing to fly to New Mexico the following week. It would be his first visit with Margaret since finally telling her the truth about several things he had done while drinking. He was afraid she would forgive him too easily. That almost made sense to me. Then I remembered a reminder. Why before Robert gets home? Ellen looked down. There it was. The part the innocent explanation could not cover. I said it again. "Why did you have to call him before I got home?" She took a breath. "Because I didn't want you to know." "Why?" "Not because of Daniel." "Then because of what?" She rubbed both palms against her jeans. "Because of Margaret." I stared at her. "What about Margaret?" "Something happened years ago. You remember part of it." "What part?" "The pancake breakfast at Lincoln." I did. Not clearly, but enough to remember being irritated. Ellen looked at me. "You thought Margaret messed it up." I remember she did. "No," she said. "You remember that she took the blame." It happened 19 years earlier. Lincoln Middle School was raising money for a student trip. Margaret volunteered to organize a Saturday pancake breakfast. Ellen helped. I was responsible for opening the building, checking the kitchen equipment, and locking up afterward. The night before, Margaret called our house. She needed access 2 hours earlier than planned because the food delivery had supposedly been moved up. I had already worked 10 hours. Our younger daughter had a college visit the next morning. I did not want to be at the school before 5. Ellen said, "Just give Margaret the side door code." I said no. District policy was clear. Only approved staff got the code. "She works there," Ellen said. "She's office staff, not facilities. So meet her." I'm not getting up at 4:30 because a pancake delivery changed. That was how I remembered it. Annoying, practical, small. The next morning, Margaret waited outside with Daniel. He had agreed to help unload. The food truck arrived. No one could get inside. The driver had another stop and left. The breakfast started late. People complained. The principal was embarrassed. Margaret took responsibility in the hallway. I remember her apologizing while I unlocked the storage room. What I had forgotten was Daniel standing beside her. Ellen remembered another moment. "He asked you why you wouldn't give her the code." What did I say? She hesitated. "You said, Because people who can't keep a schedule don't need access to the building. I stared at her. That sounded like something I might have said. You were angry. So was everybody. I know. Margaret heard it. So did Daniel. I rubbed my forehead. That still doesn't explain 4 years of hiding him. No. Then Ellen said, 2 months later, Margaret applied for another school job. I looked at her. And they called you for reference. That part came back faster. My office. A yellow legal pad. A woman asking whether Margaret was dependable, and me answering without hesitating. The administrator asked what Margaret was like under pressure. I said, she means well, but she gets overwhelmed. I remember the exact phrase. At the time, it sounded balanced. Fair. I was thinking about the pancake breakfast, the change delivery, the late start, Margaret apologizing in the hallway. Ellen said, the delivery time never changed. I looked at her. What? Daniel was supposed to confirm it. He had been drinking heavily then. Margaret asked him to call the supplier and verify the time. Daniel forgot. When she asked whether he had done it, he lied and said yes. So Margaret changed her plans around information that was never true. The next morning, when everything fell apart, Daniel admitted it to her privately. Margaret told him to keep quiet. She took the blame herself. She thought he was already hanging by a thread. Ellen said she didn't want him humiliated in front of everybody. I'd picture Margaret in that hallway again, her hands clasped, me walking past with a key ring in my belt, certain I understood exactly what kind of employee she was. She never told me. No. Why would she? I had used that morning as evidence when someone later asked whether she was reliable. Margaret did not get that particular job. There were other candidates. She found another office position a few months later and worked there for years. I had not ruined her career, but I had made a confident judgment with information that was incomplete. Daniel knew that. After getting sober, he finally told Ellen what had happened with the delivery. He carried guilt because my opinion of his mother had partly grown from his lie. That's why he didn't want me involved, I said. Yes. He thought I'd blame him. No. Ellen shook her head. He thought you'd make a project. That hit closer. I could already hear the call I would have made. Daniel, I didn't know. Daniel, here's what I meant. Daniel, let me explain. Ellen saw it on my face. At first, Margaret asked me to check on him. Then Daniel told me the old story and said he didn't want to reopen it with you. So you just agreed. At first, there was that phrase again. Early on, she avoided mentioning him because the Margaret story would come with his name. Then a few private coffees became several. Several became something she had already hidden. And later, I asked. Ellen looked embarrassed. Later, I was angry. With me? Sometimes. She met my eyes. Sometimes I liked having one thing you couldn't fix. I said nothing. And after that, I'd hidden it so long that telling you became another problem. She rubbed her forehead. Your old mistake didn't give me the right to lie by omission for 4 years. We sat there with that. Daniel had lied to his mother. Margaret had chosen to protect him. I had judged what I saw. Ellen had hidden what she later learned. No one needed a villain for the damage to be real. Daniel did not become my friend. I did not ask him to. 2 weeks later, Ellen told me he knew I knew. That was enough. Our marriage became more careful for a while. If Ellen said she was meeting someone, I stopped myself from asking for a name before she offered one. If her phone lit up, she noticed me noticing. Neither of us pretended the explanation repaired the secrecy. About a month later, I came into the kitchen while Ellen was making soup. Her phone was propped against a sugar bowl. She was entering something into the calendar. I saw Daniel's name. This time, she did not turn the screen away. Calling him, I asked, after dinner, everything okay? He's meeting his mother this weekend. First time since they talked everything through. I nodded. Ellen finished typing. Then she added the reminder. Call Daniel, 8:30. No mention of me. No instruction about when I would be home. We ate. At 8:28, her phone chimed. Ellen looked at it, then at me. I'm going to call him. Okay. She stayed at the kitchen table. I carried my bowl to the sink. When Daniel answered, I heard only his voice say hello. Ellen said, Hey, you ready for this weekend? I went into the living room and turned on the lamp beside my chair. A few minutes later, she laughed at something he said. I did not try to hear the rest. On the kitchen counter, her phone remained plugged into the charger, the screen still lit with Daniel's name.